There's absolutely tremendous news out of Cape Town involving land and housing justice. And for that, I'm thrilled to welcome to the show someone I went to school with. But we're not going to talk too much about all of the things that I got up to and he got up to at Westerveld High School a billion years ago. Please welcome Difuno Kwasi's Nicholas Butler is here. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm so happy that you're here. I haven't seen you in ages, but you flew up to from Cape Town for this. So let's talk about this momentous decision. The city of Cape Town has announced, we're going to have to do quite a lot of world building here, but there is a piece of land that has been a golf course for a long time in an area called, or around an area called Mowbray in Cape Town. And the city of Cape Town has now announced its intention to repurpose that land for mixed use income housing, as far as I understand, and also just like open access land for people. It's amazing. So tell me about it.
Yeah, sure. So, I think what's important is the first piece of context, that the area in which this golf course is located is Mowbray, and that's a very, very well-located area. That's near to jobs and schools and hospitals and all of these other sort of quality services that people need to live decent lives. And right next door to it is another golf course called the Rondebosch Golf Course. Both of them are situated on municipal land. And up until very recently, both were only paying 1,000 Rand a year to rent out, these sites the size of entire neighborhoods.
What?
So since about 2019, Difuno Kwasi and a range of other activist groupings have basically been pressurizing the city to say, look, we have an extremely segregated city, we have a very, very severe housing crisis, and we have a city which is spatially dysfunctional, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And that, it's not really rational or just or logical to have these massive, massive swathes of public land reserved for the leisure needs of a very, very small, quite elite group, when we have these much, much bigger kind of public interest problems bearing down on us and facing us as a city and as a society.
How does that much land go for 1,000 Rand a year?
Quite simply, those leases had their origins in colonialism and then in apartheid.
Wow.
So golf courses, railway lines, bowling greens, all of these different things were used by both the union and the apartheid governments to create very, very strict separations between people of different races. And as one of our very many apartheid and colonial hangovers, we basically have all of these really, really illogical leases which have just been sustained on and on into democracy. So part of our core argument has been, with the advent of democracy and with the arrival of the Constitution, we should be using public land, which is a public asset, in the public interest. We can't continue to sustain land uses that really only serve the leisure needs of a very small group if we're going to build cities that are fair and functional, and if we're going to have societies that, in which it's possible for people to move up the economic ladder and to live decent lives.
And just so for people who don't live in Cape Town, you can't rent a parking spot for 1,000 Rand a month in Cape Town right now. Yeah. That sounds like a joke. There are parking spaces in certain parts of Cape Town going for like 5,000 Rand a month rent right now.
What?
So, yeah, I know. Cape Town is whack. And so that was not a joke, that's a factual statement. And so like 1,000 Rand a year for a golf course amount of land is like scandalous, actually. Feels scandalous to me. So tell me about how activism has been able to change the city of Cape Town's mind about what they should be doing with this land. Because if I remember correctly, you tweeted about it last week. You guys have been pushing for this for like 9 years.
Yeah, so our work on this has gone back really to 2018, which is about six or 7 years now that we've been pushing it. And basically, for a long time, all sorts of people have been pointing out that we have these very, very sort of inefficient and exclusive and unjust and ultimately unsustainable uses of public land, and that we need to be mobilizing public land to kind of advance spatial transformation. And then in 2018, towards the end of 2018, we actually got our hands on some of the lease agreements. And we realized
they were off the public record.
That the golf courses and then, many, many other bowling greens, many golf courses in Johannesburg where we're sitting today pay similar prices as well. And we realized that was something that was really going to be able to stir up the public imagination. And that would cause a lot of rightful or righteous anger. Because as you say, many people pay more than 1,000 Rand a month to live in a backyard shack. Never mind, to access this very, very, very well-located, well-connected piece of land the size of an entire neighborhood. So we put together research which sort of problematized this issue, showed how it was a broader problem you know, again, which is kind of replicated across South Africa's other cities. And then we also put forward a set of proposals to say, you know, on all of these various exclusive and unjust and inefficient leases of public land, you know, you could do things differently. You could leverage the value of that land and get a whole bunch of other uses in there. You could have some market rate housing to cross-subsidize affordable housing.
Sure.
And you could actually have genuinely accessible public green space, you know,
Right.
because one of the pushbacks has been, oh no, what about this green space? You have to pay membership, you know, to access that green space. And that membership is way beyond the reach of the average Cape Townian or the average South African.
Yeah.
So, you
And
know,
the point of golf is that no one else is there. So
Yes,
you can hit your ball. Like the point is you can't fill a golfing green with like it's a park.
Exactly.
Mad.
So, I mean, we put out that research and tried to do some public advocacy. And then very, very importantly, a range of different housing movements also got involved. And we ran several political actions on the site. You know, we peacefully occupied the sites for a day and closed them down to kind of raise the point that actually, you know, this is an issue which is serious and which requires attention and, you know, which developing the golf course inclusively makes sense from almost any perspective you look at it. And the city itself kind of acknowledged this all the way back in 2012, 2011.
Wow.
But the question is always a question of urgency and priority and political will. So we've really tried to kind of push them to the table.
Yeah, because what I'm hearing is like this conversation has been going on for such a long time. There's been pressure, but with every year that passes, that lease was renewed.
Yeah.
And so I want to know, like, why was it so hard for you guys to get your hands on the lease, to just see what the actual terms and conditions were? There must have been a variety of people not willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it ultimately wasn't that difficult. I think if you ask for a lease, they may say, no, this is a contractual relationship between these two parties, but ultimately you can always submit a promotion of access to information request. And that's what we did, and there was no strong grounds to turn it down, and that's how we had got the first few leases. And once we'd gotten the first one and seen that there was this ridiculously low price, we thought, okay, we just have to push out as many of these as we possibly can and try and build as comprehensive a picture of this issue.
Okay, so let's talk about what this victory is. So we've had these golf courses, they're instruments of colonialism and apartheid, they're deeply unjust and silly and not the best use of the land. I also used to live close to Mowbray. It's like a major public transport thoroughfare, like it's in the middle of all of these places of work and education. When the city says this is now our intention is to do mixed use and mixed income land, what might that look like for this area of land that is probably no longer going to be a golf course?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing to say is that, you know, there should be some acknowledgement that this is progress, you know, and that the city is taking on board this criticism. You know, both the organization I work for and many movements that I work with, I've been very, very strong critics of the city, and I maintain many of those criticisms, but when there is progress, you need to acknowledge that. At the same time, of course, I think what's also very important to acknowledge is that this will be a complicated development. There isn't currently water or sanitation infrastructure beneath it, and it'll take a long time. So, you know, we're going to have to maintain the pressure, and we're going to have to try and sort of push for some urgency and for some follow through. But what we would like to see there is a significant amount of affordable housing, so social housing or another form of housing catering to households that earn between 0 and 22,000 Rand a month. Then most likely some market rate housing, which will generate additional income that can cross-subsidize the affordable housing. And similarly, some commercial space, which would serve a similar purpose. And then what we'd also really want to see, and which will be included simply because of the physical features of the site, would definitely be public open space, you know, genuinely accessible green space for both people that live in the development and for surrounding residents and neighbors of Cape Town to come and enjoy. So, you know, that vision to me is a hell of a lot more compelling than a golf course which largely sits empty, you know. And when you consider that Cape Town suffers from a serious lack of density, that many, many people spend more than 40% of their income getting to and from work, that they have very, very little time, you know, to spend with their families, spend with their kids, and actually very little money to make ends meet or to kind of build any wealth with. We think it really, really, really does make sense for people to be brought closer to areas where there are economic opportunities, where there are good schools, where there are good services, and where there is a real meaningful chance for people to improve their lives and to kind of move up the economic and social ladder.
Man, that makes a whole lot of sense to me, guys. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Nick Budlander, I do want to ask, because I know nothing about managing properties, is it a done thing in South Africa where some kind of managing board or organization of a new development can say, this is the affordable housing rate developments and these are the market rate ones, and we will manage the cross-subsidization of money to keep these ones affordable and also sell/rent these out at market rates? Is that something that happens in South Africa? Is it new?
Yes, I mean, it's a relatively new model, but we are starting to see it rolled out. I mean, for instance, there's several very sort of mixed income, mixed tenure developments here in Johannesburg. There's Fleurhof, Waterfall Estate, and then similarly in Cape Town, there's a Conradi development. So more and more, there's a realization that in the context of, declining state funding and really a form of fiscal austerity, you have to find other ways of crowding in capital to kind of make development happen, especially the development of affordable housing. So, some of us would love to see a much bigger housing budget and a lot more money going directly into the provision of affordable housing. But at the same time, you also have to be pragmatic and work with what's available. And that means trying to crowd in some private money and trying to find mechanisms which are actually very well established internationally and which we're starting to see the first kind of precedents really take root here as well.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a big fight in American politics a few months ago about the left and Biden and everything. And one of the American leaders said, I believe there's a moral imperative to be effective, which is a really interesting and contentious idea of like, do we stick to our principles, non-negotiable all the time, even when it means we get no progress from it? Or do we sometimes have the moral duty to cause some good change, even if it's incremental? It sounds a little bit like that. Okay, lastly, Nick Budlander, thank you so much for your time. How do people support Difuno Ukwazi and these housing organizations and land rights organizations so that they can do their work better? Because so much of it is about bullying politicians with public incentive, because bullying works and politicians respond to bullying extremely well.
I mean, I think the first thing is to engage in and try and share the kind of advocacy efforts. We've all over the various social media platforms, our website's regularly updated, and amplifying the advocacy efforts, both of organizations like Difuno Ukwazi and of housing activist movements like Reclaim the City and Housing Assembly, as you say, really does go away in kind of building the pressure. Similarly, on our website, we're currently raising money for a court case coming up around Tafelberg, which is another very well-located piece of land that we'd like to see developed inclusively. We've been in a long-running battle with the provincial government, so we're trying to raise some money there. And there's donation links on the website. And then I think most importantly is to try and, on an individual and collective level, try and kind of engage with these difficult questions of land and housing and space and spatial justice. I think often what happens and what will most likely happen with the golf course and the redevelopment there is that there will be some opposition from people who live nearby, who are unsure what this will mean for them, who fear the uncertainty that it brings. And ultimately, we need people who feel positive about this vision and who think this is an important issue to also take part in the processes, to also raise their voices and to engage in public participation, to speak to family and friends, to post on social media, and to try and get what is really a common sense kind of approach accepted and embedded in as much thinking and action as possible, really, I'd say.
It's amazing. We went to the same school and he turned out like that and I turned out like this. Nick Budlander from Difuno Ukwazi, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it and for all this amazing work.